shoulders, knees, and toes. You'll be up in the school, and the schools in the hills like this, and a lot of these places where I live, they don't have schools. So what do the children do? They're out in the field every day, they're out foraging every day, and then their school is for usually about an hour to a day, and it's under the biggest tree in the hamlet, the biggest tree in the area. And they'll all meet, all these cute little sweet kids, and then I'll go, if I'm there, and I'll teach them some English. And I think, well, what do I want to teach them? I teach them through singing, generally, like songs like that. That's a little complex, so head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and then we'll sing it in their language, right? And so they learn like 10 words in half an hour of learning a song. So that's a really good one. But I have a whole repertoire, if you, we'll sing that later.
Along with the Banana Slug song.
Yeah, the Banana Slug song, and maybe a song from Egypt. And isn't that wonderful? So now now that we've talked about wild edible foraging, I'd like to talk a little bit about communing with our friends who happen to sustain us, and really like vibing in with all of life. And when I was living in Canada, I was invited to this festival that's called the Stein Valley Festival. And I had just been working up in Canada as a tree planter, and my friend said, since you love trees so much, I was like a tree fanatic. When I was a kid, I only drew trees. I wouldn't draw people or houses. My mom was like, something wrong with our daughter. She only draws trees. And so I just love trees. I've planted 100,000 trees so far in my life. Yeah. And so basically I was at this festival to save the trees in Canada, in British Columbia, and I had a dream. And I only dream about 3 or 4 times a year, and they're always prophetic, and I always follow my dreams.
That's so weird.
I don't think that's weird, because now I know you.
That's exactly
how we are.
Have.
This is the old Aboriginal way. The psychologist's way is study your dreams, tear them to pieces, look at the symbolism. The ancient way before psychology was throw out dreams, don't dream at night, and only be open to the prophetic dreams that will come in. That's the native way, and that's the way of Buddhists and Hindus and Aborigines and the tribal people I lived with. They all were the same, is that they only dream prophetically. Right, and then they follow their dreams. Their dreams tell them what to do. So in this case, my dream said you have to fly down the coast. And so I was at this festival in the middle of the night. 5,000 people, never experienced anything like it, after this Native American festival at night are all sleeping under the stars. Nobody in their tents. And every time a shooting star would go by, 5,000 people would go, ooh! And so in the middle of the night, I had this dream. And I woke up in the morning, and the dream was that I had risen up to the stars that were shooting across the sky, and I was flying through these mountains, the Rocky Mountains of Canada, and I went to the coast, and I decided to take a left turn, and I floated like a magic carpet down the coast, wild coast, beautiful coast, and I floated inland after a long, long time, and I went inland, and I went down, and there was a forest. And it had very tall trees. And when I went down into this forest, there was this cab over camper of all things. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't even know what that was, but you put that on the back of a pickup truck, and it had these poles. And I'd never really studied cab over campers before, but this one had poles. And I went down and I looked down, and there in the dark was this overhead compartment part where there's a double bed. Do you know what I mean? Where people sleep. And it had this long window along the side of this double bed. And I floated down. And that was me, and I floated down, and I saw there was a candle glowing in that window, and I looked, and there was somebody reading a book. When the person put the book down, it was me. And that's what happens to me a lot. I mean, a few times a year. And I went, oh, and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm going to live in a cab over camper in some forest. And I didn't find out, because I went down the coast for 2 or 3 weeks, and I found out, oh, it's the redwood forest. I'd never been to the redwoods before. That's what those tall trees are. So it boom, 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 and it happened in that exact cab over camper. I ended up living there. But when I arrived at that place, the woman who owned the farm, she said, the name of our farm is called the Poison Oak Farm. And I thought, I've never really liked poison ivy. I'm from the Middle East. I'm from Ohio. And in the Middle East, we have poison ivy, right? And over there is poison oak. But I've never been like crazy about poison ivy because I had a liver condition. This is indication of a liver condition. I had really poor eyesight in the past. And another indication of poor liver is our skin. It gets very itchy over Nothing. We get rashes, we get mosquito bites, all that kind of thing. So that if you do get that kind of thing, then you need rashes easily. You need to improve your liver by taking a lot more bitter greens into our diet.
Dandelion.
Dandelion is a really good one. Yeah. So here I was at Poison Oak Farm, and they said, for you to live here, we'd like for you to chop wood for 5 hours a week or something like that. And I had my place down below. So I chopped the wood, and I was really efficient, apparently, more than they had expected. And they said, you got done so quickly. Now, after 2 months, that you've made this huge warehouse of firewood, we'd like for you to eradicate all the poison oak on our farm. We're talking 5 acres of poison oak. So I just was like, I'm not going to do that. I really love living here, and no way am I going to do that. And they said, okay, well then you can leave tomorrow. Well, I was already attached, you know what I mean? Like redwood forest, I'm living by a stream, it's magical, there's fairies everywhere. So what could I do? So I said, please, 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 please use it. And they said, if you really want to live here, then. And I think they had this plan all along. It was pretty smart. And so I put on the long sleeves, I put on rubber latex gloves, I put on a mask. I was afraid. And I just started pulling up poison oak and just dreading it and putting it in plastic bags and killing like slopes of poison oak. Well, my sweetheart at the time, he lived right up the road. He was also a gardener. And I went up to visit him, and we had this huge tickle fight on his deck. And his deck, it was an old hunting lodge. He was a vegetarian, but he was living in this hunting lodge. And so that was kind of abandoned except for, and so he rolled off the deck and grabbed me, and we rolled off the deck together, and we rolled down the slope of poison oak, like this huge slope. So we ended up in the hospital. We actually had to call an ambulance. We ended up in the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
We were covered. We were in the hospital for some time, and miserable, and it was hilarious. We would cry and laugh, cry and laugh. It was just unnerving, and we would scream sometimes because it was like, the amount of poison oak we had was phenomenal. And I think we almost died at that one. We had temperatures that like 104 degrees for days, and chills and vomiting, and everything, and 2-degree burns, whatever you want to call it, like big blisters everywhere popping out. And it was a huge cleansing process, you could call it. So basically after that, I would not walk in the redwoods. And so I decided that what the most prudent thing to do was to move out of the redwood forest because of it. Because I was so into the redwoods that it killed me because they were everywhere. So it was just so sad for me. So I moved out of the redwoods, moved to different countries, and moved to Arizona and various different nations. And then one day somebody invited me back and said, come to Ashland. So I went to Ashland, and then I met this person that day that had this, you could call it illegal property up. You know the waterfalls, the beautiful river in Ashland, Oregon, where there's just that Shakespeare Festival, and it's such a pretty town. And up above that, there's this park, Lithia Park. And in Lithia Park are all these illegal campouts. And so this guy was like, you got to go check out my camp. It's amazing. It's in a treehouse. I have a weakness for treehouses. So I just said, I'm there. And then we started walking down the path. Poison oak, both sides, everywhere. There's no avoiding. I have shorts on. I said, I'd love to go, but I can't go. I can't do it. He said, well, you can get over it. He said, you know what Native Americans do? Does everybody know? So for those of you who don't know, what Native Americans do
Don't do it.
You say hi to it.
they say hi to it in a very special way. Is that every spring, in the spring, Native Americans eat the plant.
Don't do it.
And they eat it 3 times. And it really works. And the first time we eat it,
I'm
yeah.
not allergic anymore.
and the first time we do it, we eat a very small amount in the tip of the plant. You want to get the fresh, oily leaf. It's the most toxic. And you put that, and you would want to put the tip of a pen. You don't want to put, this, you don't want to put any more than this, the first part, right? And it's the tip of the leaf. And then what you do is you put that on your tongue and swash it around. But the interesting thing is that I couldn't do it. And so basically what I did is I realized I'm going to end up in the hospital because my allergy was so extreme, right? That I thought it will kill me if I just put a little bit on there.
It gets less.
So what happened is that I realized I so wanted to see this treehouse that I had to somehow communicate with the plants, just as you said. Now what I did is I said to the plants, I'd really like passageway here, and I'm wondering if you could provide that, and if there's some way